The big game is finally here. The Orlando Magic face off with the Atlanta Hawks, so let's give it the treatment it deserves. We'll chat with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is April 7th. It will be April 8th, 2025. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com, a credentialed member of the press here in Orlando for more than a decade, covering the Orlando Magic. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD and on Blue Sky at PhilipRR. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, everything you need to know about the Atlanta Hawks, everything you need to know about where the Orlando Magic are, and everything you need to know about Tuesday's big game at the Kia Center as the Magic take on the Atlanta Hawks. We'll chat with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. You can make Locked On Magic an even bigger part of your day with the Locked On Magic Daily Newsletter, the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now. Get yourself in the know before the playoffs begin at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Magic Newsletter. I wanted to come on here first before we get into the interview just to make sure nothing happened at practice. This was recorded on Monday morning. Magic, as Jamal Mosley said, are as healthy as they could be. So not a lot to report there. The Magic, again, focusing a lot on themselves, trying to get themselves right, trying to play better. But they know how important this game is against Atlanta. Everybody is aware of what's going on in the standings and where this team is situated. So I don't want to waste too much more time. I don't want to take too much more time. Let's dive right into it. We're chatting with Brad Rowland of Locked On Hawks to preview Tuesday's humongous game. And a big game deserves a big guest. We're joined today here on Locked On Magic as well. I guess I'm joining Locked On Hawks, but I am joined by Locked On Hawks host Brad Rowland, good friend of the show. I hope I'm a friend of his show, at least for the week. Maybe not for this week, but Brad, welcome to the last week of the season. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Yeah, this might be a repeat that we'll have to do a couple of other times, maybe at least one more time. If I had to guess, we were talking about this before we started recording. I'm pretty sure we're going to have a couple more crossovers if I had to take a guess.
Yeah. I put in my rundown, and I want to talk more specifically about Tuesday's game in our last segment because while only one game actually has playoff stakes, this does kind of feel like a playoff series. The Hawks obviously had games to make up and catch up with. They played the weekend. Orlando was off this weekend, and they practiced Saturday. We asked them, like, are you guys kind of treating this like a playoff series? Like, is there a playoff book already? Like, are you guys doing anything like that? And they're like, no, we touched on them a little bit because we have the time, but it's obviously the big part of the year. We're in the last week of the season. We kind of know what the stakes are for both of these teams. The Magic lead the Hawks by one game in the standings. They play each other two more times, and so you really can't ask for much more than to say these two teams will directly determine who wins the Southeast Division. That still matters, kids. Who wins the 7 seed, and depending on what Chicago does, who's going to be the 8 seed. So I want to just get a little bit of a catch up on where these two teams are at and how these teams got here. And the Hawks, obviously, I think everyone still expected them to be to be kind of a play-in level team, but the way they've gotten there this year with defense rather than necessarily their offense, they still obviously have a lot of offensive firepower, but even after losing Jalen Johnson, their defense has been really solid. Dyson Daniels is a legitimate Defensive Player of the Year candidate. What's kind of been the secret sauce for the Hawks to stay in the postseason hunt?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was preaching this on my show for most of the season that the defense was kind of being undervalued because they still weren't great defensively, to be very fair. It's not like they're the Magic defensively. Yeah. You know what I mean? But after a couple of years of the Hawks just being truly dismal defensively, they've been pretty respectable this year, and that seems like a big jump because it is. And that's at the same time, their offense has not been quite as good as it has been in recent years. I will say the last month and a half, it's kind of been back to old Hawks where they're trying to outscore teams and they're not playing as well defensively. I think in part because they're just a lot smaller than they were early in the year. Jalen Johnson's their second best player after the season. Like, that's a huge loss on both ends of the floor. That's kind of, it's obvious, but just worth acknowledging as well. But yeah, I think the secret sauce is basically that they've got more depth this year than they've had in the past. And, I'm a record on this, but it's weird. The Hawks have already surpassed their preseason over-under win total, even with Jalen Johnson going down 2 months ago. Like, if you just said, all right, Jalen Johnson was going to get hurt for the season in February, I probably would have taken the under on the Hawks if I had to guess. I had the over on them preseason, but if you just told me that, like, oh, that's not great. But they were good enough to overcome that, and they're younger. They are basically it's a more entertaining, fun basketball team. It sounds like very basic, but it's also true. And they've surrounded Trae Young with more wings and all the things that you want to do. So I think the identity is still, at least right now, post deadline, with guys like George Niang and Karis LeVert in the mix. Like, they're a little bit more offense focused than they were early in the season, but certainly a team that has more respectable defense than they've had in the past, and more of a two-way threat than they were.
Yeah, and obviously that, I feel like that's been the Hawks kind of MO. Like, their offense revolves around Trae Young, and
Sure.
We'll talk about the season that he's had. And everything just flows around them. The Magic haven't seen the Hawks since the first game after the All-Star break, which is always a weird game anyway. So we got a little bit of an impact of what those trades did. What impact did those trades have on the Hawks and kind of getting their season right? Because they were, Orlando more came. No, I don't think this is anything controversial. Orlando came back to the pack more than I think maybe Atlanta surged up to where Orlando was. But what effect did the trades have in keeping the Hawks kind of in this position?
Yeah, I think that the trades have done a lot of things, but the biggest thing is they provided a little bit more depth that they ended up really needing because of Jalen's injury. Basically, they traded two guys for three is essentially what happened. The Hawks traded Hunter Bogdanovich for LeVert, Niang, and Terrence Mann. And while the three of those guys have had, it's been hit and miss to some degree, getting just another body has been really helpful. And I mentioned it earlier, but their offense has been what they've leaned on, and they've really improved on offense, which is not only because of the trades, but certainly it has helped to juice them. More shooting in particular, with all three of those guys are able to shoot and space the floor to some degree. And the Hawks have really sneakily the last couple of years had some really big spacing issues, which is not like what you would think about for the Hawks. You think about 2 or 3 years ago with Trae Young and Gallinari and Bogdanovich and all the shooting. They've had strongly below average shooting the last couple of years, and now it's not necessarily that way. So that's the biggest input, sort of imprint on the actual floor. Their schedule's a little bit lighter post All-Star break too, which led to some more wins. If we had done this show, 2 weeks ago, I would have been probably riding a little bit higher. They were playing much better. They did get a win on Sunday, which was badly needed, but they also beat the Jazz at home, which if you don't beat the Jazz at home, something's wrong with you.
You say that the Magic got swept by the Jazz this year.
I know that, but I those were early in the season, right? I believe at least the one that at home was the early season.
It was in January. Yeah, it was the first game after Jalen got hurt.
This crazy stat where the Jazz have not won a road game since I think it was like January the 5th. Like, it's been 3 months.
That's us.
Was that Orlando? Perfect.
That's us. They swept through Florida. Yeah.
But they've lost 19 of the last 20, all those things. Anyway, the Hawks got not a layup. Nothing's ever assured in the NBA, but they won a game that they were supposed to win on Sunday. But before that, they lost 5 of 6, and it was a little bit spirally around Atlanta. Not that only a couple of those were like terrible losses, but it's just one of those things like, what is this team now? Like, I was probably pushing back a little bit on Hawks fans that were getting too excited when they were winning more than they were losing, because it was like, look, it's probably schedule related, all this stuff. And now I'm probably not as low as some are about the Hawks, but they're generally a 500 basketball team, and that's kind of where they live.
Yeah, I feel like that's our job, is to like calm the panic and like cool down the excitement and be like, hey guys, like there's a reason for all of this. It's like I'm sure you will note what happens Tuesday. I'm sure like we will come up with the excuses like the Magic had 4 days off coming into this game. It's a weird. It's not quite a playoff game. But it definitely has that intensity. The Hawks the Hawks have, like you said, it's kind of surprisingly been a like below average offensive team for most of the year. I think most of us, when we think of Trae Young, we think of he's just a top 10 offense by himself. What's been different about Trae? And they're averaging 118 0.9 points per 100 possessions, I believe, since the All-Star break, if I read the stats that I have open on the other page here correctly. What's been different about Trae Young this year, where the offense maybe has needed a little bit of a kick or needed some injection to get into high gear?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is definitely Trae related. Some of it, I would say, more of it is not Trae related, to be honest with you. But I think that it's the one angle that is just obvious is that the Hawks are still unable to score when Trae's off the court. That's been a 7-year thing in Atlanta, which is still happening. They have like a 104 offensive rating with Trae off the floor this year. Like they just can't score, and that's just the reality. But to your point, the numbers with Trae on the court have not been quite as good either. I mentioned it before, but the lack of spacing is my number one thing probably on that. The Hawks have taken a bunch of threes. Like they have one of the best shot profiles in the league. If you believe in the kind of more advanced shot quality metrics, which I know Quinn Snyder kind of regularly references, the Hawks head coach, but they don't make a lot of shots. They get a lot of good shots and they don't make them, which is frustrating to try to explain to people. But they take more threes, more shots to the rim. Oh, I know. You probably, it's just funny. The broken record that you have to be sometimes to talk about these things. But I think the one knock on Trae, and by the way, Trae's leading the league in assists this year. I think he's having one of his better years overall, but it's hard to sell that because his shooting numbers are down. And that's a flashing light when people look at his profile. It's like, oh, he's shooting this from the floor, and I get it. And that's a question. Like he's probably not quite as bursty as he used to be athletically and beating guys one-on-one. Still a great pick and roll partner for anyone basically. But I think in general, he isn't as efficient, which is a combination of his own shortcomings and also a lack of space to kind of, when you're 6'1", generously, you need space, and he hasn't had a lot of space. So that's the number one thing for me, but also, the lack of a number two option for half the season. The Hawks were already kind of rebuilding this year on their offensive end of the floor. So lots of questions, but certainly he's still an engine that's trustworthy. Just they have not been as dominant, but you already said it. They have been like back in the top 10 or so since the All-Star break. Yeah.
And look, they scored 140 points. I don't like even against a bad defense like Utah, like scoring 140 points is nothing to sneeze at. They had 22 threes on Sunday night.
Yeah, that's I have the franchise record, I believe, or maybe the season high. One of those things. Even
though the Magic are good at defending the 3-point line, like there's always that fear that you're playing a team that will get up threes, make a bunch of threes, and that's a weapon the Magic just don't have right now. We've talked a lot about the Hawks. Let's get a catch up on where the Orlando Magic are at. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends at Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 per month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. We're back here on Locked On Magic and Locked On Hawks, a crossover episode as the Orlando Magic face the Atlanta Hawks at the Kia Center on Tuesday in a game that has tons of stakes. If you're listening to this, you probably know the stakes with who's going to win the Southeast Division, that coveted Earl Lloyd Trophy, the best. I will say it, the best of the division trophies. We may be the Southeast Division, but we have the best namesake for our trophy. I still don't know Magic keep the Earl Lloyd Trophy from last year. I hope it's somewhere safe and comfortable and warm. The Magic do hang division banners in their practice facility, so like banners, winning matters, right? Like I get divisions don't mean as much, but the Magic were the 5 seed last year because of division. So Brad, I'm gonna turn it to you. What do you want to know about the Magic as we get ready for this critical final week of the season?
Yeah, I do kind of wish, and I was talking about this with somebody even recently, I wish the division champion was still guaranteed top 4 seed, Would that be fun? That used to
That'd
happen.
be fun.
I'm old enough. I'm old to remember when I was covering the league when that was still happening.
I'm old enough to remember when there were two divisions and the division winners got the top 2 seeds.
Perfect.
And it was a mess.
It'd be very, very funny. People would be very angry if one of these teams got the 4 seed this year. But anyway, okay. So my number one question is, how have they figured this out? Sans Jalen Suggs, because that was one of the big storylines. Was basically like, look, the Magic, as soon as Suggs went down, they just can't seem to win a basketball game, and that has now obviously changed. And I've seen a little bit of the Magic, but what has changed? What have they figured out in the world where they knew they didn't have Suggs anymore?
Yeah, some of it is just like they got healthy. Like Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner were back, but Paolo took a solid 5 weeks to kind of figure himself out and kind of get back to the level that he was playing at. The game he had in Atlanta, like literally he said heading into the All-Star break, he's going to take that All-Star break, kind of rest, kind of get his conditioning back up. And since the All-Star break, and I know he had the big game in Atlanta, since the All-Star break, he is, I believe, second in the league in scoring average. His shooting efficiency has kind of shot up. And so he's kind of started to put to rest some of the narratives that he's kind of an empty calorie scorer. And that's obviously like when your best player is just struggling so much. Like he was shooting low 30s often, like like mid 30s at his usage rate. You're just not going to win many games when your best player needs 25 shots to get 25 points, like with the usage rate that he has. And so he's really elevated his game, and just the Magic haven't had any major injuries. Cole Anthony missed 2 weeks. And that actually kind of turned into a blessing in disguise because they put Corey Joseph in the starting lineup. And for whatever shortcomings he has, he gave them a real point guard. He gave them a real organizer to kind of help them pick up their pace a little bit and just get guys in the right spots and kind of distribute the ball to Paolo and Franz a little bit better. One of the easier answers is they're shooting better. They're at like 35% in the last 15 games, which is still not good among the league. But when you've been shooting 30% from 3 for the entire season, like that's like manna from heaven. And so it just feels like they finally had some time to, get their feet under them a little bit. Their best players caught a rhythm, and now they've settled into roles and everybody knows what they have to do. Now, can they do it at a high enough level to beat good teams consistently? Like they're a 500 team. Like, no, they probably can't do it. Some nights they have it. Some nights they just lay eggs. That's what 500 teams do. But they've kind of just been able to finally settle down after the season just being constantly disrupted by injuries throughout.
Yeah, I did notice that Paolo had a pretty ridiculous level of stat production in the month of March, like 30 points a game, like doing big time stuff like that, which I thought was probably some of the turnaround. I mean, this is not new to you, so I apologize for even asking the question.
Go for it.
But Orlando being the only non-taking team in the bottom like 8 or 9 in offense this year, it's like I know it, and I look at it again in preparation for this podcast. It's like, how are they this bad offensively? And is it just as simple as 3-point shooting? Is that the number one thing that they just obviously they don't have a lot of that, but is it just that, or is there more beyond that? Because like it's hard to explain a 500 level team being this bad on offense.
Yeah, 3-point shooting is a big part of it. You can't escape it. You just when you have like I tell my listeners, it's really just a math problem. Like they have to be within 2 or 3 threes. It doesn't matter how poorly they shoot. If they make 9 threes, the other team can't make more than 12. And like, even if a team shoots 33% from 3, if they're making 15 of 45, which, happens in this league now, the Magic really struggle to compete with that. And so just missing threes, teams just pack the paint. It's literally like 5 guys have a foot in the paint. They're willing to double team Paolo Banchero on drives or Franz Wagner on drives. And then it just becomes a matter of trust. Do Paolo, a lot, I think in that early part of the season or early part when Paolo came back, some of it was, Paolo needed to work his way through some things and he was going to make mistakes. It's an oblique injury's core injury. You got to like kind of regain some of that. But some of it came down to he's got an open man, but he thinks his shot's the better shot. And I don't know if I can blame him for that. It's just, like if you're looking at, at the time, like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope should be a shooter that you trust. And he's shooting better than 40% over his last 15 games from 3. But if, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is shooting 32% from 3, are you swinging the ball to him, or do you think your contested mid-range shot is the better shot if you're the star? And that's been part of the problem. The other part is, for whatever people think of Jalen Suggs being the quote-unquote point guard of the team, and what that experiment means and all that, the Magic lost their point guard, and they didn't really have a replacement. And the Magic used Paolo and Franz a lot to bring the ball up and initiate offense. The difference is, like when Corey Joseph does it, he gets over the line quickly. He gets guys into sets quickly. Guys aren't like trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. They're not like sort of out of position, even though the Magic play this kind of positionless style. When Paolo brings the ball up, or even Franz brings the ball up, they tend to need to take a second or two to organize and get guys in the right spot. And then all of a sudden there's 12 seconds left on the shot clock and they haven't done anything. And so that, like, them trying to pick up the pace, like you can usually tell the Magic are going to have a good offensive game, or they're in a good offensive spurt when they're kind of getting into their actions quicker. I think they're 23rd or 24th in the league in seconds to shot after a made basket, according to Unpredictable. It just takes them a long time to get themselves going. And so they have fewer opportunities to get shots. And that's, they play at the second slowest pace in the league in terms of possessions for 48 minutes. Even when they're trying to pick up the pace, they seem to be playing longer possessions. And some of that's their defense. Like, they get stops and makes it hard to get quick shots as well. But the Magic are really kind of battling, like, we got to play faster, but we don't have players necessarily who want to push the pace. Like Jalen Suggs was really good at pushing the pace. And that's been like, it's just a lot of like very deep offensive problems that just they haven't been able to solve.
I was literally going to ask you if the pace was intentional, because they do play so slow, and the Hawks are, in contrast, play very fast. The Hawks are top 3 in the league in pace this year. And I wanted to know, I mean, obviously a defensive first team, it does kind of intuitively make sense that you want to slow the game down a little bit, or at least you're comfortable playing that way. Seems like, though, they might want to play faster, and they just haven't figured out how to do it all the time. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And look, I tell you, like, look, I remember Jamal Mosley a few years ago was asked about Luka, and was asked about pace in terms of how the Mavericks were playing, because they were like a slow team too. And Jamal Mosley said, you play at the pace of your best player. And Paolo Banchero likes it, for better or for worse, is sort of this kind of ISO scorer still. Is kind of a, everyone compares him to Carmelo Anthony. He's a Carmelo Anthony ISO scorer type. He wants to get the ball, stop, survey, look, read where the defense is going, jab step, do all those things that take a little bit of time. And so he's very comfortable playing at a slower pace. So I don't ever think the Magic are going to be the fastest, pace team in the league. Like they need to get a point guard. They need to find someone that will pick their pace up a little bit, get more fast break opportunities. But I don't think the Magic will ever be a fast-paced team, and their defense is a big part of that as well. But the Magic are just too slow. And like you can feel it, and you're just like too slow. You gotta get into it. We're already at 13. Jamal Mosley says he wants the ball over the midcourt line at 21 seconds. The times that they do that are exceptionally rare. And so there's an emphasis now to pick up the pace a little bit more and play a little faster. But it's definitely been a big problem that they play as slow as they do. Makes sense.
And you start looking for answers, and without watching every possession, like I know you do, it's like, how is this team so bad on offense?
Yeah.
Because and intuitively it does make sense. And I think the Suggs injury, and I'm a big Suggs fan, just to reveal that, that's underplayed, I think, nationally at least, like as to how much that absence means.
It's not just the Suggs injury; it's the Mo Wagner injury too. Like, I mean, when you look at the big scope of the Magic season, they missed their 4 top scorers for 20 plus games. A lot of it concurrently, a lot of it at the same time for about 2 weeks. There are a few teams that I think that could miss their top 4 scorers for that length of time for a quarter of the season each, and be able to survive and maintain an identity and maintain consistency. The fact that they were down Paolo and Franz at the same time for a month and a half. The fact that, Mo Wagner tore his ACL in December. They used their top bench scorer. That was one of their big superpowers, was they had one of the highest scoring benches in the league. They were, before Mo Wagner's injury, I believe they were 5th in the league in bench scoring. And obviously other injuries play a factor in this. But since Mo Wagner's injury in December, they're like 22nd in the league in bench scoring. Their bench is just wildly inconsistent, and you don't know if you're going to get a good game from Anthony Black, a good game from Cole Anthony, a good game from Jonathan Isaac or Goga Batadze. there's a lot riding on the starters to carry that load. And, the Magic starting group is better offensively than their numbers. I think they're like a 115 offensive rating with the starting group with Corey Joseph, or 116. So that's respectable. But you can't play that group for 48 minutes. And that's where they hit issues.
Makes sense to me. Do you want to go to the actual head-to-head?
Let's talk about the head-to-head. We'll get to that. We'll talk about what to watch for as the Orlando Magic and Atlanta Hawks play game 1 of their three-game series in air quotes. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. But traditional in-person therapy can be expensive, often ranging from $100 to $250 per session. That's where BetterHelp comes in. With online therapy, you get quality care at a price that makes sense, saving you time and money. Therapy isn't just for life's toughest moments. It can help with everyday stress, learning how to set boundaries, or developing positive coping skills. Having access to support when you need it can make a big difference. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. This is Philip Rossman-Reich, the host of Locked On Magic, joined by the host of Locked On Hawks, Brad Rowland, for this crossover episode for Game 1 of the Magic and Hawks potential 3-game mini-series where only one game actually has playoff stakes to it. But we wanted to get out ahead of it because this is as big as a regular season game could feel like, until at least potentially Sunday's game, depending on what happens in the interim. But it's pretty rare to see two teams this close in the standings, this much on the line, playing each other this late in the season like this. Brad, I'll start with you. What is your big key to this game on Tuesday?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are many of them, and I'm sure we'll touch on a couple more. But I would say there's a reason I asked about pace in the previous segment. It's like, who's in control of how this game is flowing is probably what I would say. The two games that happened so far, if you add them together, it's been much more of a Magic pace, less than 100 possessions per game overall in the two matchups. And by the way, these two teams are as close as they possibly could be for the two games. Also, they tied in the first two games. It's +6, -6. It's kind of very appropriate. These teams are so knotted together, and they were in those two games as well. But I would say, can the Hawks have the pace that they want in this game? Because when the Hawks when things slow down, they are less comfortable. Orlando, I think, would be much more comfortable playing this game in the 90s or the low hundreds, something like that. Grinding it out.
I don't know if the Magic can get to 120. I'll just
be honest. And that's,
I know they're scoring better now, but I don't know if they can get to 120.
And the Hawks tend to live in that range, right? And part of that's, again, the amount of possessions that they're playing at. But also the Hawks are much better when they actually. I guess the counter would be Atlanta is better when they actually can set their defense, which means they have to score to set their defense. Of course, that's one of those things that, like, the feedback loop of offense and defense are not individual things. That they can be talked about that way, and I do that too. But if you don't score, your defense is going to be in a worse spot. That's just the natural reaction. So it's like, all right, who can establish pace? And that means for the Hawks, that means scoring and being able to put the ball in the basket early and often.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because like pace is just so big. Like the way a lot of teams try to beat the Magic's defense is just beat them down the court, like make them cross match, get them in miscommunications, force them into matchups they're not comfortable with. And while the Magic are switching 1 through 5 right now, and I'm curious if they will do that. They'll probably have Kentavious Caldwell-Pope guard Trae Young, if not Franz Wagner guard Trae Young directly. So they're going to put size on Trae Young, and that's kind of what I'm watching in this game. These big games are always about the stars, and Trae Young he's so crafty getting to the basket. He's so crafty creating fouls. He's just the engine of everything. I am curious how the Magic are going to try and handle him. I do suspect that they'll start Franz Wagner on him, and Franz kind of gets the best perimeter player regardless of size. They will switch 1 through 5 throughout the course of the game, so you'll see Wendell Carter step out on him, and Carter's been guarding a lot of guards lately. He took a long turn on Luka Doncic in the Lakers game a few weeks ago. He took turns on James Harden. He took turns on Stephon Castle, on Bub Carrington in recent games. I know those aren't the same level of names, But the Magic want to use their versatility, and so I think what I'm really watching for is not just the pace, but how the Magic's size bothers the Hawks, or how the Magic's size how the Hawks deal with their size. Paolo Banchero had a pretty big game against Atlanta in February, and it just felt like everyone's just kind of too small. Like there's just no one that can match him size wise. You got to keep Okongwu, in the paint, but he's guarding Carter. The forwards that they have to offer, like there's just no one to go with. I imagine Dyson Daniels is guarding Franz Wagner, and even then, like Franz has a huge size advantage on Dyson Daniels. Like we saw a couple weeks ago, I'm trying to remember who it was. There was a really good defender guarding Franz Wagner, and it was just like he's too small. Like there's just no chance that guy has defending a 6'10" forward like Franz, who can get to his spots and get to the basket. And Daniels is a little bit bigger, but he's still got a huge size disadvantage. And so how the Hawks make up for that size, and whether the Magic just try to kind of bully and power their way to the basket is, I think, one of the big keys in this game.
Yeah, I think general size is a thing that I will be looking for as well, just because, especially the forwards, like you already mentioned them, Franz and Paolo are very big. And it would not surprise me. The Hawks changed their starting lineup on Sunday. I don't know if that's permanent, but they started George Niang next to Okongwu. It would not surprise me if Okongwu was guarding Paolo to open the game, and they have Niang on Carter. That would make some logical sense to me on both sides. The Hawks tend to do that with Okongwu if there's a big because they don't have to your point, they don't really have, with Jalen Johnson unavailable, they don't really have a big they don't have a big game with Jalen Johnson. Right, it is. And that's one area where I'm definitely going to be watching as well. There's also like one very glaring spot on offense and on defense that's like a big Orlando strength and a big Atlanta weakness on paper. On offense for the Hawks, it's ball security. Orlando is very good at turning you over, and the Hawks are not always great to take care of the ball. That's a pretty obvious one, but it's also just like you can't turn the ball over a lot. And then the other one on defense is the Hawks have been fouling a lot recently. And the Magic, if they have a strength on offense, it's their free throw rate.
It's the only thing they do offensively that's anywhere near the top half of the league. Like,
yeah, so and the best it's funny, like two of Orlando's biggest strengths are also like Atlanta's somewhat key weaknesses. So like, which one of those, you have to imagine the Hawks are gonna foul, but how much are they gonna foul? Like that, there are degrees to those. Anytime you have a strength versus weakness matchup,
I would argue the free throw battle is as key as anything in the league, as anything in this game, because the Magic are first in the league in free throw rate. They're also top 5 or bottom 5 in the league in free throw rate allowed. They're physical. They're not ashamed to say they're physical. They're not ashamed about it. Their challenge to the officials is, you can't call everything. We're going to hit people. And if we take a few fouls, we take a few fouls. But when you have a guy like Trae Young, you don't want him to get a rhythm. He's very good at getting to the foul line. The first game, he essentially got all his points at the foul line. They did a really good job defensively on him. He got others involved. Their offense cratered, which it usually does. The second game, I think the Magic did a little bit better at him getting to the foul line. He was 5 for 9 in the second, or he was 9 for 15 from the foul line in the second game. Maybe that's 3-pointers. Hold on, no, that's 2-pointers. I don't have I'm trying to find the stats here on Basketball Reference. He was 8 for 10 in the second game, 6 for 7 in the first game. The Magic have to keep him off the foul line, and he's going to be crafty. He's going to get to the line a little bit. He's too good not to. But how much the Magic kind of like find that line of physical without fouling, or being too physical and fouling, finding that line is going to be a big part of this game, because while this does feel like a playoff game, I'm not sure the officials are going to officiate it like a playoff game quite yet. The Magic are definitely going to be more comfortable when they get to maybe the play-in and the playoffs, when they're maybe allowed to be a little bit more physical. But it's going to be a battle, and I think that the two teams are going to have to kind of find the line for themselves this game.
I agree. I do think you never want to focus on the officiating. I hate doing that, but how this game is officiated is going to matter. I mean, because of what you just said. If Orlando's allowed to be as physical as they want to be, that's trouble for the Hawks, I would say. Doesn't mean they can't overcome it, but that would be a swing factor. Or if the game's being called super tight, that's an advantage for the Hawks. So it's like there is a little bit of a give and take there.
Yeah, for sure. And like this is something Jalen Suggs always did. He always picked up an early foul, and like people are like, why is he picking up an early foul? It's like, no. He's figuring out the line. He's figuring out what he can get away with, and then he adjusts. And that's what he was really good at The Magic, I would say, other players have not been as good at that. Like they'll give up some bump fouls. They'll give up some cheap ones. And I think the other thing to watch in this game is who builds confidence first. Like you mentioned, the Hawks are kind of in a little bit of a down part right now. The Magic are playing well. They're winning games again, but their offense just it shuts off real quickly. And how the Magic respond when they're not making shots, when the offense is really hard for them, that determines games against these quality opponents. Like against Washington, they gave up a 19-point lead, let it get down to 3. They figured it out. It's Washington. You can't do that against a team like Atlanta. You go cold for that long, give up big leads like that. They were down 16 early in the second game. The Magic's offense goes quiet. What the Magic do in that moment, because it's going to happen. What the Magic do in that moment probably determines the outcome of this game.
Yep, that makes sense to me. And look, we don't have to go crazy on this right now, but I think these two games, especially the game on Tuesday, even matter a little bit more for the Hawks than the Magic, as far as which team has more pressure. And part of that is because the Magic are ahead of the Hawks in the standings, and also Orlando has the division tiebreaker.
The Magic win the division tiebreaker with one win in these two games.
Yeah, I was gonna say unless the Hawks sweep. If the Hawks sweep, they're going to be in better shape anyway. So if they split, it's advantage Orlando in a lot of ways. So that puts a lot of pressure on the Hawks, especially to win the first road, because you don't win the one on the road. Like I'm not gonna say the Hawks are dead if they don't win Tuesday, but they're in trouble if they don't win on Tuesday when it comes to the division race.
I mean, for just from the Magic perspective, if I did my math correctly, if the Magic win Tuesday, they only have to win one of their final 3 games. Now, for Hawks fans who are freaking out about that, their final 3 games are Boston at home on a back-to-back. So home back-to-back. And then they go to Indiana on Friday. It sure feels like Indiana's going to need that game. Boston plays New York on Tuesday in New York. Maybe they sit guys. Personally, I think the Celtics, the NBA is probably pressing them, play your guys against the Knicks, please. Play your guys against the Knicks, please. That's a TNT game. But I also kind of feel like the Celtics want to kind of make a statement to Orlando and say hey, don't get any ideas if you're the 7 seed that we're the better matchup for you. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know, but we'll see what happens Wednesday. It's that time of year where teams that are locked in tend to sit their guys. But yeah, to your point, the Magic were trailing for much of the post All-Star break portion of the season. They gave away a lot of games at home. They're not particularly strong at home. I think they only have three home wins since the All-Star break. They're 3-8, I think, at home. They've been really struggling. They played some good teams, but they have not been able to kind of get over the hump at home. They've been really good on the road. They won 5 straight on the road. So everything feels up in the air. These are the kind of 50-50 games that you want late in the season. And you have to just find a way to win them. That's what playoff basketball is about. Just find a way to win games, even no matter what's going on. Brad, I want to thank you for hopping on for this crossover episode, giving us an idea, giving my listeners an idea of where the Hawks are at. I hope I gave your listeners an idea of where the Magic are at. And get ready, and we'll do this again in a week, maybe. We'll do this again Sunday, maybe. I don't know. Maybe do this again tomorrow. Who knows? I think you said you're going to be in the building. But Brad, tell my readers where they can find you. Or my listeners.
Yeah, I am coming to Orlando, so I look forward to seeing you in about 24 hours. But Locked On Hawks is the place to find all of the Hawks coverage. I'm at BT Rowland on social media. And for Hawks folks, where can they find all of Philip's massive following on Orlando Magic basketball?
Yeah, obviously the best place is on Locked On Magic. You get the daily podcast. You know the drill on that. Your everydayers. Make sure I get the AI to note that I said that. You can check out my written work at OrlandoMagicDaily.com as well. And this is a good time to mention, we are currently running a fun little promotion with our newsletter. The playoff race is heating up for the Magic and the Hawks. And we're all wondering if they could secure the playoff spot. That's why we talked for the last 30 minutes or so. So stay in the know with the Locked On Hawks and Locked On Magic podcast newsletters. Get a chance, and you can get a chance to win one of these amazing prizes by subscribing. A $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your sports cave setup, a $300 Game Time gift card, and a $200 Fanatics gift card. Sign up between April 7th and April 30th, 2025. That's Monday through the end of the month to be entered. Our Hawks and Magic newsletters deliver real-time updates, expert analysis, and playoff insights tailored for you. Now is the time to subscribe. So subscribe now for free to the Locked On Hawks or Locked On Magic podcast newsletter and stay ahead as the season unfolds. Subscribe today. Click the link in the description to enter or go to lockedondaily.com to find your team and help us out and help yourself out too. Brad, I want to thank you again for joining us on the show. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you Sunday. I'll see you next week. Well, we're going to be best of friends. Thanks again for hopping on, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you all again next time here on Locked On Magic and Locked On Hawks.